What is up? What is happening, TFA fam? We're back again. It's another week. We're into May now. Ooh, this year is moving by. But it's not really, actually. It feels like it's taking forever, and it's moving light years in terms of speed with everything that's going on. But here we are, back again with another episode. My name is Kevin Steele. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyWrath13. You can find my co-host, Cody Kutzer. That man needs as soon as the great state of Pennsylvania opens up, that man needs to find a barber because the hair is getting wild on him. How you doing tonight?
Doing awesome, man. The locks are still flowing. The wife is still annoyed, and I can still not get a haircut. So I'm doing great.
That is what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Always trying to annoy the wife. So, anyways, we got some fun stuff to talk about tonight. We decided that we're kind of trying to be forward thinking a little bit and understand what we can talk about now, because everyone's still going to keep talking about the NFL draft for like the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you can only beat that into the ground so much. Where without OTAs or anything else to go off of, we have no idea what's going to happen. So we figured we'd kind of jump in and do kind of an NFC East fantasy preview. And we're also going to give you some top five, or our top 5 sleepers right now. That'll, obviously expand as as we get closer and closer. But each week we're going to start coming up with a secondary topic, maybe some strategies, some tips, whatever. I think next week we were talking about maybe doing some like keeper league strategy, which I am a keeper league guy. That's what I primarily play in terms of redraft and stuff like that. So I love some keeper league, and there's a lot of different strategies you can go with that. So we'll be talking about that next week. Anyways. So, first off, before we get started on this, I did want to bring up this. One, are you a Last Kingdom fan?
I have never even heard of it.
Oh, Lord. Anyhow, it is probably my favorite show on TV right now. I just wrapped it up, finished it up last night. Season 4 just came out. It's on Netflix. It's absolutely amazing. I would put it up to Game of Thrones or any other great TV show there is out there. It's an amazing show. The plot, the characters, the actors, it's fantastic. So I was hoping you've seen it so we could wax about it for a little while. But of course, in typical Cody fashion, he has not seen it.
Very typical. I'm not I don't know, man. I don't watch a lot of movies. I repeat a lot of the same shit, right? Like it's, oh, look, The Office is on. Let me catch that episode for the 98th time. Oh, South Park's on. Let me catch that one for the 50th time. Like, same movies, same shows. I'm a creature of habit.
Well, sometimes you got to venture out a little bit. I don't watch a lot of TV myself. Like, I watched The Last Kingdom and The Walking Dead, and that's pretty much it right now. That's pretty much the only shows that I can think of that I watch.
Is The Walking Dead still going on?
It is still going on, and it is fantastic.
Jesus.
It is amazing right now. But The Walking Dead, I guess the Ozarks, I like that show too. So, but that's pretty much it. That's my list of shows that I watch. So I was hoping you've seen it, but you haven't. So we can keep it moving then, I guess, since you haven't seen the great Uhtred of Bevenber. Anyways, a couple news and notes. Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, signed with the Cowboys, which is a team we'll be talking about, but I don't know. It's kind of a weird landing spot, I guess. I guess you're going to take a job to get a job. Like, I know a lot of people predicted the Patriots, and I thought that would have been a horrible, horrible landing spot for him to land in. Because even if he would have taken over as a starter there's absolutely no weapons for the New England Patriots. And you could make a case the New England Patriots have the worst offense in the league. I don't know. So He signs there. Not any major news unless something happens to Dak. And then the NFL plans to release the schedule on Thursday night, which is major news, right? That is going to draw insane ratings, right? We always kind of joke about it every year when it comes because we know who the teams are playing. We already know that already. We just don't know when, if it's going to be prime time, stuff like that. But you can already look and see who they're playing. You can look and see who the teams are playing next year and the year after that. Like, we already know it. But it is going to, with no other news or with no other sports right now, the NFL is loving life with what's happening. So yeah, they are releasing the schedule on Thursday. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But right now, I don't think we talked about having like a marathon, just all night, just bashing through the schedule, a release party. But we decided not to this year. Maybe next year we'll fit that in the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL normally has a stranglehold on everything as is, but like you said, with nothing else going on, like, I think that's going to be like a heavily watched like release. Like normally I don't pay any attention to it. I wait till it all comes out. I'll look through it on, see what people are saying on Twitter and whatnot. But this year, man, with nothing else going on, that might be appointment viewing. And that is the stage of quarantine that we're in, where it's like, bro, you going to be watching that release or what?
I know, right? I will be. I know I will be. I am that person. I'll be editing the pod and watching it. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Well, I guess the only thing we do have, UFC actually returns this weekend. UFC 149 is actually on Saturday. So we're actually going to have that. We'll actually have our first sporting event in months. And then NASCAR, heck yeah, is going to be back. Is going to be back next weekend. So we'll actually start to have a little bit of sports, right? Some DFS. My DraftKings balance has stayed right there. It hasn't moved. So I'm sure DraftKings is thrilled to finally get some stuff back.
I will say this: don't bother asking me, did I see the race or the wreck or the pit change on any future podcasts, so that way we don't have the Last Kingdom thing happen again, because I'm just going to give you the same answer on that as well.
Well, that is bullshit, because NASCAR is amazing. Play some NASCAR or DFS, and it'll change your mind. So, anyways, let's go ahead and jump into it. We're gonna start off with the NFC East, and we will start off with your Dallas Cowboys. This is a team that, last year, and if you really look around, I mean, they had so many offensive weapons, right? You have Dak, you have Ezekiel Elliott, you have Amari Cooper, you have Michael Gallup. Then they went out and added CeeDee Lamb over the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And they obviously changed coaching staffs. The hand clapper is gone. No more on the sidelines in Dallas. He has went to the Giants, and we'll talk about that after a little while. But, some things about Mike McCarthy to kind of refresh our memories, because he was out of the league last year. He did say that he kind of embraced analytics while he was out of the league and started really looking into that. But, just some things on Mike McCarthy. He loves throwing early and often. Only 5 times while he was in Green Bay, did the offense have a running back with over 240 carries. So that's something to note. He does favor throwing on early downs, which is a smart way to keep defenses on their heels. If you look at some of his pass to run, McCarthy has 58% pass to 42% run while he was with the Packers. Now, it should be noted that I think their best running back, right, was Amon Green, Eddie Lacy,
baby,
and Ryan Grant. I think those were those were the only actually running backs that had over 240 carries. I think we can all agree that Ezekiel Elliott, as much as I love Amon Green and Ryan Grant, throwbacks to the back in the day, Ezekiel Elliott is much better than all of those. So I think that is something to keep in mind. But his offense has averaged 22 rush attempts per game compared to that of Jason Garrett's offense that averaged 28.1 attempts back in 2019. Some things about him, like he was often criticized for being way too conservative at times, and I know that's one thing that really upset Aaron Rodgers. Back when he was there, he would always audible out of his play calls, and they would get into a lot of sideline issues. So I think that is something that he would often he relied too much on the arm of Aaron Rodgers and his ability to create plays with his legs, which is another, now maybe this is a good fit with Dak and Dak's ability to be able to do some of that as well, but that's not something he wants to do. And I hope that this year off, maybe he learned some things, and kind of as he was able to step back and take a look at some stuff. Now, he did say that he was going to allow Kellen Moore to remain as the offensive coordinator here, so I think that is something to note. But he's done this in the past where he's given guys, the role of offensive coordinator, but then he yanks it away. So we'll see here. I just thought those are some things that we should probably bring up about him, and some things to look at in terms of moving forward.
The one interesting with that, real quick, with Kellen Moore, is I remember whenever he got when he was hired as the head coach, he did say that he was going to be learning the language that Kellen Moore was using, that he wasn't going to try and bring in his offense completely, that he was going to try and learn what they were already doing with Dak and the offense that they had in place. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, like you said, how long of a leash that he's going to let him have, and if he is indeed going to be letting him call the plays, or if it's just going to be a matter of learning their offense and then he kind of takes the reins from it. So that'll be something interesting to watch, because I remember how excited all of us were the first couple of weeks for the Cowboys, because it was like, oh, dude, look at that. They're actually using motion. They have bunch sets. And then that kind of seemed to fade away as the season went on. So that will be interesting to see how all that shakes out between the two.
No, for sure. So, I mean, like I said, in the past, when things started to go awry is when he takes over. He comes in with the West Coast offense is what he typically runs. And so, which is a lot more, it's less throwing down the field, more conservative, short passes. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, there's no excuses for this offense to not be elite, right? Like we already mentioned, they have Dak. I mean, Dak has always been sort of undervalued among fantasy circles, where every year it's like there seems to be much more people that are just kind of lackadaisical on him. Like, oh, okay, if he's there, I'll take him. But there's not generally a bunch of hype that surrounded him. But I mean, if you look at him last year, he finished as QB4. I think every year, if I'm not mistaken, he's finished as a QB1. Maybe one year he hasn't, but I'm pretty sure every year he's finished as a QB1. So he finishes QB4 overall. He was third in fantasy points per game. He was fifth in deep ball attempts, second in deep ball completion percentage, second in completed air yards, eighth in rushing yards, and he had 11 QB1 weeks last year. So that is certainly something you're looking for from your fantasy quarterback whenever you're drafting him. That consistency. There's a lot of quarterbacks who it's like a roller coaster, right? Where they have dips and valleys, right, with them, and peaks and valleys. And with Dak, like I have him right now ranked as my QB3. You could, if you had him at QB2, like ahead of Lamar Jackson, if you wanted to, I could understand it. I know some people think that's crazy because of his ability, Lamar Jackson's rushing ability. I do think Lamar Jackson does regress a little bit. I don't think it's going to be anything significant. I think, like I said, I have Lamar Jackson at QB2. I have Patrick Mahomes at 1, and I have Dak at 3 right now in my redraft rankings. But I love Dak this year. I mean, he has so many weapons. We know that Mike McCarthy loves to air it out. I do think that some of that numbers comes down. I don't think that he follows that 58-42. It would be somewhat ridiculous to do that with having Ezekiel Elliott there. There is a couple of things like Travis Frederick that cannot be understated. That is a huge loss for that offensive line with him retiring. So that is something to mention. But I still think that as a whole, this offensive line is still one of the best in the league, and I do think they continue to feed Ezekiel Elliott. So where do you come in on Dak? Are you right there that you feel like that he is another top 3, top 5 quarterback for you?
Yeah, I think he has to be. I mean, I really don't see how many other quarterbacks are you going to throw up in that top 3, 4, 5 conversation. I mean, he's finished there. You already alluded to the fact that he's been a QB1 every year. I think he's been a QB1 every year that he's been in the league. Now you add Lamb, and then the thing with that too is the defensive pieces that they've lost. So maybe they're not able to control games as much. It might lead to more pass heavy kind of things. So he, like you said, there's no excuses for him to not be putting up super fantasy friendly numbers this year. So Dak is someone who, I mean, who do you have at like 4 and 5? Do you know off the top of your head, or do we have to have another AOL dial up kind of moment here from last week? I'm assuming maybe Kyler is up there. Not sure where you have him. Like I said, I just don't know what other quarterbacks you're going to throw up there. I mean, maybe Breeze, I guess, if you want to get spicy and throw him up there in that range. So I have Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray are my top 5. Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty chalky, and I think that's going to be your top 5 in whatever order you want to put them in. But it's mostly going to be Mahomes and Lamar 1 and 2, and then those next 3 are going to kind of be shuffled around, I think.
Right. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think we need to spend much more time talking about Dak. I mean, with the plethora of weapons they have, it's going to be in maybe I don't think it's going to be any worse than it was last year. I could see it regressing a little bit, maybe to a 55-45 split run to pass. I don't think it's going to be significantly closer, because that's just McCarthy just loves to air the ball. So anyways, let's move on to Zeke. Again, he's somebody that could take a little bit of a hit here with Mike McCarthy, but I don't think it's anything significant. He finished as RB5 overall last year. He was 5th in fantasy points per game, 5th in opportunity share. He was 9th in targets, which is kind of interesting because I know there for a while we were concerned with him because he wasn't seeing the same sort of target. So he did end up kind of picking it up as the year went on. But he was 9th in receptions with 52, 11th in yards created. He was 60th in fantasy points per opportunity, so he was not all that efficient, and 10th in evaded tackles. Finish was 1,800 total yards and 14 touchdowns. Like, I would probably project him somewhere pretty similar to that in terms of the running backs. I think I have him right now. I believe I have him as RB4, RB5 currently. I do know that I have Saquon at 1, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and then I have him at 5. So I think you can move him all the way up to 3. I know last year there was a lot of people thought that he could lead the league in rushing, that his touchdown numbers were going to go way up, but they ended up throwing the ball a lot more than what we had anticipated, and they were much more of a creative offense, like you mentioned earlier in the year last year. When they played some bad teams. They were rolling teams, and people thought they were a Super Bowl contender there for a while. So with him, I don't think it changes all that much. I could see a little bit of a dip, but I don't think it's going to be anything significant, even with the addition of CeeDee Lamb. So, with that, I don't have a lot to add to Zeke. Like I said, the only thing that I would be a little bit concerned about is, do they run the ball a little bit less? Maybe take some wear off it. But even last year, he still finished with over 300 touches last year. So I don't think it's if it is any lower than that, it's like 290. I don't think it's anything dramatic.
No, I don't think we see a huge decrease. Maybe with the addition of Lamb, some of those targets go away. But I think you easily and safely take him as a top 3, 4, 5 option at running back, and you kind of just let that be that. It's not going to be a huge drop off no matter what. So, but I think the more interesting talking point here is with this receiving core. How do you see it shaking out with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Blake Jarwin? I know has been a guy you've been kind of talking up a little bit early on. What are you foreseeing here with those 3?
So, first reaction when CeeDee Lamb was drafted, I was like, man, this is not good. This is not good for Gallup, who I was really, really, who I really liked heading into this season. And then you had Amari Cooper, and I'm like, man, this is going to kind of eat each other up. But then I started thinking about it and started being more realistic. I don't think CeeDee Lamb is going to come in and just take over this offense or anything like that. If you go back and look last year, Randall Cobb was still relatively involved in terms of this. And if you just look at Randall Cobb had 83 targets last year. I think he had 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. So basically you have 83 targets vacated from him. You have 83 targets vacated from Jason Whitten that's gone. There's targets to go around here. And so, I think people are, as I've kind of watched, Michael Gallup has, certainly lost value for people, but I don't think he really should have. I still think, at least this year, I still think he's just as valuable of a commodity that he should be. But the good news is now his value is going to drop to where you're going to get him at a much better value. If you look at Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper, you compare them last year, they were damn near the same player, right? Amari Cooper had 20.7 target share. Michael Gallup had 21.7 target share. Amari Cooper was 14th in fantasy points per game with 15.4. Michael Gallup was 15.2. He had 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns. Amari Cooper had 1,189 and 6 touchdowns, I believe. They were pretty much the same guy. Amari Cooper had 4 wide receiver 1 weeks, 4 wide receiver 2 weeks, and 8 wide receiver 3 weeks or worse. And then Michael Gallup had 2 wide receiver 1 weeks, 4 wide receiver 2 weeks, and 7 wide receiver 3 weeks or worse. I believe he missed a game or 2 as well. So, they're pretty much the same guy, right now, but you can get Michael Gallup much cheaper. And you're going to be able to get Michael Gallup much cheaper unless all of a sudden a hype train comes up. Because I do think that something that people have to take into consideration with this rookie class, and it's something I'm probably going to be talking about a lot over this entire, we do not have OTAs. We do not have, in training camp, I don't know what training camp is going to look like. So these guys are not going to be able to build rapport. They're not going to be able to go in there and learn the playbook. Yes, they're going to be given the playbook, stuff like that, but being able to build that rapport with Dak is something that's going to have to take time over the offseason. And it's going to be interesting how this all plays out. Now, if they have a normal training camp, maybe that eases a little bit. But I still think that there's going to be some rookie curve here, a little bit steeper than what we typically see on most years. And so for that reason, like, I'm not as high on CeeDee Lamb year one as maybe some other people may end up being. And I think Michael Gallup can end up being kind of a sleeper and kind of a steal here in this offense. As far as the tight ends go, I think Blake Jarwin can still have a role that's valuable. Like I mentioned with Jason Whitten, like Jason Whitten, I think he finishes a tight end one. If it wasn't, it was like right outside of tight end one territory. He finished with 63 receptions, 529 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Like I said, he had 83 targets. I didn't realize he had that many. Like, I didn't think it was that many. But this offense was much more pass happy. But with that, like, I think Blake Jarwin could still be. I don't think he's somebody that I want like he's not like an Austin Hooper type like last year that I was kind of excited about. As of right now, I don't think that's going to end up being him. But he's a very explosive athlete, somebody I kind of like, and somebody like in a best ball if you can get him as your tight end 2 or 3. Like, I think that is a terrific value, something that I would be looking for in terms of there with Blake Jarwin. Because like I said, even Blake Jarwin himself last year, he only had a 7% target share, but he had 31 receptions, 365 yards, 3 touchdowns. But he was 7th in fantasy points per target and 5th in fantasy points per route run, which is pretty impressive and a little bit of opportunity. Now, small sample size, keep that in mind. But Blake Jarwin is certainly somebody that I'd be keeping in the back of people's minds in terms of once we get closer to the fantasy season and redraft and stuff like that.
Yeah, a little surprised. I just looked at a 4for4 site where they have their ADP, and Jarwin is actually, I mean, he's tight end 19, so obviously that's late, but he is going at 12:01, which was a little earlier than what I was expecting. And just to go back real quick to Cooper and Gallup, Cooper is going the beginning of the 3rd, and Gallup is going at the end of the 7th.
Which I love that. I think that is great value for Michael Gallup. Had they not drafted CeeDee Lamb, I felt like he probably would have been like a 4th or 5th round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, they were both,
agree.
The good thing is that we've seen now that Dak can support multiple quarterbacks and stuff, or multiple wide receivers, multiple pass catchers in an offense. So I think it's wheels up for a lot of these Cowboys this year. So do you have anything else that you want to add? The only thing I will say is I feel like we always gloss over Tony Pollard. I really like Tony Pollard as well. I considered making him one of my sleepers. I really do like him. And we saw it last year, super efficient running back. And I think he ends up being a little bit more involved in the offense, maybe gets a little bit more of the pass catching work to take a little bit of the load off of Zeke. But if anything were to happen to Zeke, which Zeke has been like an Iron Man, hasn't missed a game outside of the suspension. But if anything were to, like, this dude would step right in and be an ultimate wide receiver 1. So, I'm not a super big proponent of drafting handcuffs, but drafting him in the later rounds, I think is an optimal strategy, something that I would probably look to do, because I do think that he's going to have some opportunity in this offense and get some touches. And I also think that if anything were to happen, like, he would be that instant lottery ticket.
Yeah, for sure. He's a guy I'd want in best balls for sure. And then, kind of your last round pick, depending on how deep your benches are and everything else, because like you said, he was efficient. We saw what he could do. And the running back position just in general, prone to injuries, although that hasn't been the case for Zeke. If something were to happen to him, I'm not sure what that depth chart, now that I'm thinking about it since we brought this up, I don't know what that depth chart looks like behind Zeke. So I think Pollard would be the one to step in and be looking at the overwhelming majority of those touches. Like, I can't see them going with a committee if Zeke were to go down. So he's definitely someone I'd be keeping an eye on for, like I said, your late round pick, and especially in best ball leagues too. So keep this moving to Philadelphia Eagles. As far as the coaching changes for them, no major changes for fantasy purposes. They did add a passing game coordinator who was their quarterback coach that they promoted. And they actually already had a run game coordinator, but no pass game. So I guess they added that, but it's still going to be Peterson who's calling the plays. If you look at that offense over the past 3 years, they were top 8 in offensive plays in each of the past 3, and 2 of those they were in the top 3 in 2 of those 3 years. So, and then for passing purposes, they were top 8 in pass attempts in back-to-back years. So that's kind of what their what their offensive pieces are looking like. As far as additions to that offense, obviously Jalen Reagor, our boy, going the round 1 pick. The surprise pick that kind of threw everybody off, Jalen Hurts going in the second, but it does make sense with the injury history that Carson Wentz has had, and with a coaching staff that's able to scheme as well as they are. Hurts is definitely intriguing, but I mean, obviously not anybody in a redraft format that you're going to take a pick on. And then they also added Marquis Goodwin via trade to the offense as well. So out of those additions, I mean, obviously Reagor being the main one. Do you have any interest in Marquis Goodwin, or do you kind of think that he is like a Deshaun Jackson, I guess, kind of insurance play, or do you see both of them being utilized in that offense?
Yeah, I think it's more depth than anything else. With that, it's sort of what we talked about a little bit with them, but there was a report that came out. I know it's been weird. There was a report that came out this week that Alshon was going to be a major part of the offense, and then this, came out afterwards that maybe that's not accurate. I don't know. Like I said, the right now that there's a little bit going there, but like I don't have any interest in Marquis Goodwin. I think Jalen Reagor could end up being should end up being the wide receiver 1 for this team by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. I think his upside is immense year 1, and then you still have Zach Ertz and the Dallas Goddard combo. But I think in terms of the wide receiver room, I want Jalen Reagor if I can get up. Depending on where he goes and where he ends up coming in draft boards. Especially for redraft, because as we know, redraft is a dicey situation to be drafting rookie wide receivers in, and a lot of times, more often than not, it ends up paying off not taking some of these guys that end up getting overhyped in redraft, because there is a lot of struggle in year 1, and like we just mentioned, with these guys, they're Jalen Reagor is going to be in the same spot. Now he has a better opportunity than what a CeeDee Lamb does. I think there's some other stuff. I still think that Deshaun Jackson, if he can come in healthy, I think that he can be a contributing member of this offense. It's somebody that I think could be a sneaky best ball play who can have some big weeks. We saw it last year. We didn't get much opportunity because he played I think like 1 game, 2 games, something like that before he went out with injury. But I don't know. I still like Deshaun Jackson. I don't really have any interest in Marquis Goodwin. Where are you at on J-Jaw? Do you think that he becomes a factor in this offense, or is he just dead?
I don't know, man. I wasn't a big fan of his coming in, but when I was looking some stuff up, preparing for the pod, I did come across something that I guess kind of made sense because he showed up pretty well in the preseason. I know a lot of guys were getting excited about him, based off of that. But I was reading about J-Jaw, and I guess he was. I couldn't remember what the injury was, but apparently he was banged up enough to the point where, like, when he would wake up in the morning, like, he would need help, like, walking and, like, going to the bathroom and like early in the morning. So, like, who knows? Could he? I kind of pegged him as the Alshon Jeffrey kind of replacement. I thought they both played pretty similarly as kind of that outside, just sideline, back shoulder, jump ball, contested catch kind of guy. So. Could he step into that? I mean, maybe. Like I said, I wasn't all that high on him to begin with. So, to me, out of this receiving group, obviously the tight ends we want pieces of, and then for me, man, it's Reagor, and I'm not really interested in too much else outside of that. I think it is worth mentioning with Carson Wentz last year, he was 5th in the NFL in touchdown passes, and I think that's. I think you got to give him a little pat on the back, man, especially considering what he had. It was the tight ends, it was Miles Sanders, and then Greg Ward. You know what I mean? So the fact that he was able to do that, I think he had over 4,000 yards passing. Like I said, fifth in the NFL in touchdown passes. And their leading receiver, who was Alshon Jeffrey, had less than 500 reception yards. So he was a quarterback 1 last year. If you look at what he was doing in terms of deep pass attempts, he was top 8 in 2 of the last 3 years. So I think that's still going to be a big part of it. Obviously, Reagor can stretch the field. They did take John Hightower later in the draft, obviously on day 3 at some point. I think he ran like a low 4.4, so he's another speed guy. And then Jackson, Goodwin, depending on how much they're using him. The tight ends can obviously get down the field as well. So I'm excited for Carson Wentz and what kind of back. I mean, not even necessarily a bounce back, but to kind of see what he can do with these additional weapons around him. Somebody that I'm really high on this year that I like a lot, Miles Sanders. There's been so much talk about, is it just going to be a committee? Peterson's never just relied on one running back. Well, they even said last year after they drafted Miles Sanders was they haven't had a running back like Miles Sanders with his skill set. Obviously, they didn't really add anything. I think they picked up
Corey Clement.
They got Clement for another year. They brought in Michael Warren, I think, UDFA. But I mean, none of those guys I really look at and say, oh man, I wish they wouldn't have done that, because that puts a damper on Miles Sanders and what his outlook is. I mean, if you look at what he did last year in his rookie year, he was RB15 and half PPR scoring, and 25 running backs had more touchdowns than Sanders did. So he didn't do that on the back of just having a bunch of touchdown luck and finding the end zone. He was 21st in touches amongst running backs, and that was despite having there was a 4-week stretch, I think, maybe in the beginning or the middle of the season, where he had 21 total carries. And he was
to start the year, if I remember correctly.
Was that the start of the year? Yeah. He had 12 carries was the most he had, and then between those 4 weeks ended up being 21 total carries altogether. Super efficient with the touches he did get, because he was 6th in yards per touch amongst running backs. And then you look at what they lost in their running back room, and there's 146 carries that were vacated between Jordan Howard, Jay Ajayi, and Darren Sproles. So I think I don't think it's going to be a complete bell cow kind of situation for Sanders, but I do think that his opportunity and everything else is really looking up for him. I think they're still going to get some of the guys we already touched on involved. Obviously, Boston Scott is apparently a thing from what I've seen on Twitter, with people just talking about how his snaps really picked up toward the end of the year. I think that was just a case of I think Sanders was banged up toward the end of the year as well. So I'm not really looking at any of those guys, and I'm not going to have any kind of hesitation on taking Sanders. I think it's, like I said, I think it's wheels up for him. He's someone that I'm really looking at as having a kind of a breakout year and adding to what he did last year. Then to wrap things up, the tight ends. I mean, we really don't have to go too much into depth with them. Obviously, Zacharias and Dallas Goddard. Last year, they actually combined for 36% of the Eagles' target share. Both were their top 2 for receptions, yards, and touchdowns. The kind of question I have is, will Goddard be as heavily utilized as he was? Was that a case of they literally just didn't have anything else? The Eagles have been known for running 12 personnel and having the 2 tight ends on the field at the same time, but I don't think they've necessarily been known for utilizing them in the passing game as much as they did. And if you look now at early ADP, Goddard's going at 902, which kind of surprised me when I saw that. I thought that that might be a little rich, considering he's a tight end 2 on his own team. So anything you want to touch on in there, anything with Sanders or the tight ends or anything like that before we move on?
The only thing I would say about him, I love Miles Sanders as well this year. I think he has opportunity to be a top 5 running back. I do think that is in the range of possibility for him. I think TJ Hernandez loves some Miles Sanders this year, and was saying that he thought he could catch 100 balls this year. I think is what it was. Maybe it was 80 or something like that. I know it was a ton, and I think he said something about that he could lead this team in wide and reception. So
he had 50 last year, I believe. 50, 51, 52, something like that.
Yeah. So I love some Miles Sanders, and I think it's wheels up for Miles Sanders in years too. I do think Boston Scott will have a role, and I think it could be a little bit Darren Sproles-ish, right? Or maybe I think he'll have some weeks where he'll be a wide or a RB, RB2, RB3. I think that's certainly there for Boston Scott. We saw it last year. I don't think it's going to be enough that he's going to eat into Miles Sanders' role or hurt Miles Sanders in any way. So, in terms of the tight ends, if you look at Dallas Goddard, it's tough because taking a team's number 2 tight end in the 9th round is a little rich.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, I mean, last year he only had 1 week sub 50% snap share, and in terms of targets, I mean, he had at least 3 or more targets in every single game, but 1 as well, right? I mean, other than that, though, he basically played 70%, 60%, 83%, 80, 89%, 52, 65, 84, 86, 100% of the snaps. He's running a ton of routes, which is everything that you're looking for in terms of route run. I mean, it's tough not to take notice of him, right? I mean, he scored, had multiple tight end 1 weeks as well. He had 9.8, he was top 12. He had 1 in week 6, week 7, week 8, week 11, week 12, week 13, week 15, and week 16, he was a tight end 1, right? Now, it doesn't take a lot to be a tight end 1, as we know, right? So, also, if anything happens to Zach Ertz, it is motherfucking wheels up for Dallas Goddard.
All
right?
the way up, yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think those are some of the things that are baked in, and with his efficiency and how much they run 12 personnel, I think that's still going to be there. I don't think they're going to go away from that too much. So, I do like that, and I do like Dallas Goddard. So, yeah, I mean, at 9th round is probably a little high. There's probably a couple other guys I'd probably rather have. But if he fell in the 10th round, I would probably look to take him there just because of his immense upside. So, anyways, let's go ahead and move over to the Giants. They're another team that switched head coaches. Actually, the only team that didn't was the Eagles in this among this division. So they fired Pat Shurmur, which wasn't shocking whatsoever. They brought in Joe Judge, which was a shock, right? Because who the fuck was Joe Judge? Like, you asked anybody prior to this, like, where of all the guys they could have got, like, this is who they brought in? The Patriots wide receiver coach no one ever heard of? Whatever. Okay. So they did that, and then they go out and just bring in the ragtag group of everybody who got fired, right? The hand clapper is back on the sideline, but he's with the Giants. They brought in Freddie Kitchens, I think, to be the tight end coach, who was a train wreck in Cleveland.
My God.
So
what a fall. What a rise and what a fall for that guy, huh?
Yeah, fucking Freddie Kitchens. So Jason Garrett, right? So as we already kind of talked about, you can look at the numbers last year, what they were able to do. Now, they say that Kellen Moore was calling the plays, but I think Jason Garrett obviously also had a hand in that.
Yeah.
But if you look at his offenses, the Cowboys' passing offense was never ranked lower than 9th in yards per game or 11th in yards per play, including he had 2 top 5 finishes in both categories. The rushing offense was top 10 in yards per play 4 times as well. So those are some positives with the offense. I do think that this is good news for Saquon. We'll get to that. The key additions, right? They did not go out and add any wide receivers or running backs to really of consequence. The only thing they focused on, mainly in the NFL draft, the 4th overall pick, they picked Andrew Thomas at left tackle. They picked Matt Pert, who's an offensive tackle, in the 3rd round. And then Shane Lemieux, who's a guard, in the 5th round, which was smart. Their offensive line is not very good. This is something that they needed to do, was to be able to adjust this, right? So I think those are really smart to invest, to protect your assets. Other than that, this offense is virtually the same as it was last year. You have Saquon, who, as we know, had that high ankle sprain, which really hurt him most of the year. The only question mark with Saquon, in my opinion, is I think his targets, which he still received 73 targets last year. Some of that was with Eli Manning, but he still was, but Daniel Jones is a little bit more mobile, obviously, and can actually run the ball. So if you look at Daniel Jones last year in 13 games, he averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game, 3,000 passing yards. He had 1,690 air yards, 18 money throws, which was 12th. But he had 29 interceptable passes that should have been intercepted, which was 5th. And then he had 24 touchdowns, 279 rushing yards, which I believe was 7th, 2 rushing touchdowns. Some things you'd like to see him improve upon. He had a 30.4 deep ball completion percentage, which was 28th in the league, 38.9 when he was pressured, which was 11th. So that is a positive for him. But he only had a 78.0 true passer rating, and he only averaged 0.39 fantasy points per dropback. So there's certainly some things there. I think if he can clean up some things, because he was very high and very low. Daniel Jones last year, he certainly, like I said, had his ups and his downs. He had 4 weeks of QB1 weeks, so they're all top 5. Everything else, he was almost unstartable, right? So, if he can kind of put all this together, kind of take a step forward, if the offense can stay healthy, if Saquon can stay healthy, Evan Ingram can find some sort of miracle and actually stay healthy, which I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think there's some good things here with investing in the offensive line. So with Daniel Jones, I think he's an interesting late round flyer with this offense and his ability to use his legs. Again, he's like a poor man's Josh Allen in that regards, that he can actually use his legs, but he's not somebody that I would ever expect to get 400 or 500 rushing yards in a season. But I do think, he's like Alex Smith, right? Where he can give you that extra, he can get you that extra 4 or 5 points on a couple of weeks that's going to push you over the top. That's going to help out. So with Daniel Jones, that's kind of where I like him. Saquon, I have him as my number 1 overall running back this year. I do think that Christian McCaffrey takes a little bit of step back. We've never seen a running back, I think since 2000, I think this Priest Holmes actually was the last running back to repeat as RB1. So I right now I have Saquon Barkley. We don't need to get too far into it like we already mentioned. He had that injury last year that really hampered him. He came back and he fought his way through it. He's now 100% healthy. I think actually adding Jason Garrett could actually be a plus for Saquon. And then the wide receivers, I think, is kind of the big question. Darius Slayton, I was actually going to have him as one of my sleepers, but he's going at like RB4 or wide receiver 41. Like he's probably going to be their wide receiver 1 in this offense, right? And we saw him last year have some pretty solid moments, and they didn't draft anybody, so I really like Darius Slayton. He played 79.4% of the snaps, which was only 48th, which I think that goes up. He received 83 targets, 48 receptions, 740 receiving yards, 15.4 yards per target, and only 78.3 of his targets were catchable, which was 46th in the league. 1.81 yards per route run. So with him, but he was I remember watching him last year in preseason and really starting to kind of get on board with some Darius Slayton, but he was still a relatively unknown. Like nobody knew who Darius Slayton was. Nobody was super excited about Darius Slayton. Nobody's pounding the table for Darius Slayton. So I think if he can take another step forward, I think he's in a good position. And if he stays around that range, that is some solid value for him. Where are you at on these wide receivers with Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Golden Tate?
Slayton is the guy that I'm going to be most excited about, most targeting, because even though, like you said, he was starting to pick up some steam toward the end of the year, he had some of those nice flashes. Like he kind of seems like, especially for redraft purposes, he's kind of been forgot about already. The thing with him that has me excited is he at least plays a different role and has a different skill set than everybody else on that team, right? Like before Slayton became a thing, I remember we were always joking about looks like they're just going to be running strictly bunch sets from the slot because they didn't have that outside presence. Well, with Slayton, at least he brings an outside presence. He has speed that maybe some of the other receivers don't have. So he's definitely somebody that I'm going to be looking forward to targeting. Oh, wow. So I just brought up 444's ADP again, and he's actually going in the 10th round. Currently, he's going at 10:03. That's earlier than what I was expecting.
To me, that's still ridiculous, though. I mean, he should be going higher than that. He's likely their wide receiver 1. Takes another step in this offense, upgraded the offensive line. I don't know. I think he probably pushes for over 100 targets this year. I don't know. That seems really low. I think, if he was going the 7th, 8th round, I think that would be fair. And I wouldn't be upset with that. I'd still be happy with getting him there. Getting him in the 10th seems a little bit late.
I was just a little surprised to see him that high, just because there really hasn't been that much hype surrounding him. Sterling Shepard going at 12:05, Golden Tate going at 13:11, and then Evan Ingram is going at 5:12. So there you go. I was not expecting that whatsoever. So yeah, still out of those guys, I'm still going to be targeting Slayton the most. We're touching on mostly redraft stuff here, but I think for dynasty purposes, you can get him cheap right now as well, especially with with all the rookie drafts and rookie fever going on. So he'd be the guy that I would be targeting. I mean, I still like Sterling Shepard, but man, those concussions and head injuries are starting to get scary for him. He seems to be missing more and more time with that. So, I mean, who really knows? And at this point, Golden Tate is Golden Tate. You already talked about Evan Ingram. He literally needs a miracle in order to be able to stay on the field. So, I haven't done my rankings yet as early as you have, but just kind of thinking about it, I would have Barkley at 1 as well. So to me in this offense, it's going to be Barkley that I'm going to be looking at early as, that RB1 to start the year. And then Slayton is the guy that I want out of that receiving core.
I agree. I do like Sterling Shepard a little bit, but like you mentioned, the injuries, and then with Evan Ingram, if the guy could stay healthy, it should be in the top discussion for top 5. Maybe
that's where he should be, that 5'12", right? Like if he could stay healthy. But I can't spend that capital.
Yeah, no. It's not being factored into how, like, last year I think he played 8 games. The year before that he played 11. So like it's not being factored in, right? And like people are drafting him at probably what his ceiling is, and we have yet to see it. Maybe it happens this year. Now, there's also been speculation of him being traded. So, like, I don't know. Like, it's tough. Like, I have him, I think, ranked as my number 5 tight end, actually, or 4 or 5. But I wouldn't draft him there. So, like, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Evan Ingram. But amazing talent, and if he could stay healthy, like, I think he could ball. But that's the big if.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's wrap up this divisional preview with Washington Redskins. Obviously a bunch of coaching changes there. Ron Rivera coming in from Carolina. He's bringing Scott Turner with him as their OC. He was Carolina's quarterback coach last year. Obviously the son of Norv Turner. So I really don't know what to expect. I don't have anything written down here as far as the tendencies. Obviously, Rivera is a defensive guy, so we can't really look at what he excuse me, what Carolina did offensively in the years prior. Scott Turner has never held an OC role in any level before. He's always kind of been a wide receivers coach, offensive coordinator, quality control kind of guy. So I mean, obviously, being Norv's son, we would expect some variation of what Norv Turner has been doing. So just for to bookmark it, the last we saw of Norv Turner was 2018 with the Carolina Panthers. They were 14th in points for, 15th in pass attempts, and 12th in rushing. Something that his offenses were known for, or especially what we saw with Carolina anyway, was using a lot of motion, using some different sets and different formations, and trying to create mismatches and being able to get the defense to declare what they're doing in terms of their coverage and, where they're bringing pressure from, which is something obviously that Dwayne Haskins had a lot of trouble with last year in his rookie season. But some key additions they brought into that offense. Antonio Gibson, I mean, to me, that was a little bit of surprise. I didn't see him getting that high draft capital. He was taken at the beginning of the 3rd round, 66th overall. They also brought in the Liberty kid, Antonio Gandy Golden. He was 4th round, 142nd overall. And obviously their key loss was Trent Williams. And with all of that kind of craziness going on with him, and he ended up being traded to San Fran, which is obviously a huge loss because, I mean, when that offensive line was able to stay healthy, which wasn't too often, they had probably one of the best offensive lines on paper, but they were just never able to stay healthy. Scherf came back, I think, on maybe a franchise tag or a tender of some sort, so he'll be back, but I mean, I think there's a lot of question marks just overall with this entire offense and this entire team, just in general. So just kind of looking back at what they did in 2019, obviously Dwayne Haskins, there was some talk about, could they take Tua at 2? That kind of seemed like that was more smoke and just trying to get somebody to trade up. Obviously, they ended up taking Chase Young there, but last year Dwayne Haskins took over as a starter week 9 and played 7 games as their starting quarterback. I think he appeared in maybe like 1 or 2 more, but as their, he's the starter going forward. It was 7 games. Over those 7 games, just a little over 1,200 total yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. What that basically comes out to would be 25 pass attempts, 15 completions, and only 175 yards averaged across those starts. So nothing too fantasy friendly or anything you're going to be running out to grab. Only had 2 games over 15 fantasy points. So again, but like they really didn't do much to help him last year. Maybe this coaching staff can put a scheme in place that's going to be more helpful to him, because obviously he wasn't getting any help from the offensive line, the weapons, the coaching staff, or anything like that last year. As far as the running backs go, I mean, it's crowded, and I don't think anything is set in stone. I mean, we're looking at Darius guys who, like Evan Ingram, we were just talking about, can't seem to stay healthy and stay on the field. Adrian Peterson is somehow still producing at a relatively high level especially for his age. Antonio Gibson, obviously they drafted this year, Bryce Love, Peyton Barber, and J.D. McKissick. I mean, I really don't know what to expect out of this group. I mean, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if this is another year of Adrian Peterson leading that group, just because I could see a scenario where Geis gets hurt again. Antonio Gibson, I honestly think you can just throw him at running back and let him just kind of go, right? But I would get worried that maybe they try and use him in some more like gadgety, gimmicky ways, because of how versatile he was at Memphis with, we've already touched on his receiving, rushing, and his special teams profile and a bunch of podcasts before this, so we don't need to dive into that any further. I would love to see Antonio Gibson kind of get the ride here and kind of be a 1B with Geis as a 1A. I think that would be a lot of fun. But, I mean, like I said, man, there's just so many questions with that. Currently, Geis is going at 708. Adrian Peterson is going at 1802, and Gibson is going at 1707. Now, out of this running back group, Kev, I mean, is there anybody that you're, I mean, not even necessarily targeting, but is there anybody that you like, anyone that you're interested in out of here?
There's just too many mouths to feed here in this offense, like, right? But then, because I really like Antonio Gibson, and I like Gibson's long-term upside. Like I said, we've talked about it. Like, I think he has Joe Mixon in his range of outcomes. But there's just so many guys here right now. I really like Darius Geis. I talked about it before they ever drafted Antonio Gibson. So with AP still there and he's going to get touches, like, I just don't think you can mess with it. So, like, it's a hard pass probably for all these running backs, especially where they're being drafted. So I think Antonio Gibson's at least a worthy of maybe a late round flyer or something like that, just to kind of check things out with him. But past him, like, and to be honest with you, like, their wide receiver core, it's tough to get on. Like, I love Terry McLaurin. Like, I love that dude. Like, I think he is really talented. And as long as he doesn't really move up, if you can get him at like wide receiver 30, wide receiver 31, 32 range, that wide receiver 3 range, like, I wouldn't hate it. But I'm not in love with it either, because I don't really know what to expect from this offense. I think they're going to try to pound the ball. I know they have some other guys people really like as well. Kevin Harmon, Steven Sims, who kind of came on late last year as well. They have no tight end to speak of now that Vernon Davis decided to retire and Jordan Reed is no longer there. So, like, I think if you wanted to take, like, if you're in like a deeper league, a 14, 16 team league, like, and you wanted to take a shot on Kelvin Harmon or a Steven Sims, I think you could do that. But in a 12 team league, I just can't see myself drafting those guys. I think the only guy that I have any interest in is Terry McLaurin, and that's about it. Like, I think that's where it cuts off with me for the Redskins. I think they still have some work to go. I'm still not convinced that Dwayne Haskins is worthy to be a starting quarterback. I'm not sure if he's Deshaun Kaiser yet or not. We'll see. And I think if this ends up tanking, I think you end up seeing them taking a quarterback really early next year in next year's NFL draft. So, but there's not a whole lot of fantasy goodness here on the Redskins. So that's pretty much where I come in on them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like you said, Terry McLaurin's the only one that, we're going to have any interest in, really. He was wide receiver 28 last year and half PPR, and that was with missing 2 games. I remember he got off to that crazy start at the beginning of the year where he just kind of blew up and, made all the people who were tooting that horn, during the offseason really show up out in the Twitter streets. Consistency wise, though, kind of looks like the numbers we were talking about with Amari Cooper. wide receiver 1 weeks, 3 of them, wide receiver 2 weeks, 3 of them, and then he had 8 at wide receiver 3 or worse. So, I mean, obviously there was all the injuries at quarterback. Then he had to suffer through Dwayne Haskins' play. He really didn't have much in the way of help either. So, I mean, you touched on Kelvin Harmon. So, if there is any sort of like glimmer of hope with him, in his last 7 games, he did have at least 3 catches and 40+ yards in 5 of those. Steven Sims kind of seemed to be the guy that a lot of people were getting excited about. He had at least 4 catches and 40 yards or more in his last 4 games, and then in the final 3 games, he did have 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, it's kind of the same thing to me with the running back group. You kind of look at it and you just go like, what else really is there much to say? You already touched on the tight ends. We don't even have to speak of them. I mean, if you're drafting any of these guys, you're either Jeremy Sprinkle's mother, or you're just in some kind of like crazy like start like 3 tight end, 16 team kind of league. So, like outside of that, I mean, Sprinkle did have, I think he had like 30 some catches last year, so he did put up some production, but there's going to be an entire list of other guys that I would want here. Obviously, they did add Thaddeus Moss as a UDFA, so maybe he's someone to watch out for, but he'd be more of like a week 3 waiver wire ad kind of guy. So, I mean, that's that's kind of all there is to say about the Redskins, man. Hopefully, they can put a scheme around Haskins. It's going to make him more fantasy viable, because there are some pieces that I do like, but as of right now, as we're looking at it, man, there's really not too much to be excited about.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll see what ends up happening there. So I don't really have anything else to put in for the Reds, because, like I said, it's Terry McLaurin right now or bust, or if I'm in a deeper league or larger benches, maybe I consider somebody like a Kelvin Harmon or Steven Sims, so, or an Antonio Gibson. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on. So that wraps up the NFC East fantasy preview. Next week we'll be doing another team. I think we maybe do the NFC South next week, which will be really fun to do, because that whole entire division looks like just fantasy sex, right? Just a 3-way orgy of goodness that's going to be happening there in that division with the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Saints. So, anyways, we'll wrap this one up, and we'll jump on to the next one next week. So, anyways, why don't you start off and tell us about your first early sleeper, if you will.
Yeah, so like what the guy that I'm excited about here, dude, give me Preston Williams, currently coming off boards at 1304. Basically, they upgraded a quarterback, they upgraded their offensive line, and then that's really it, man. Like they didn't add anything to their receiving core outside of, they did add somebody in the 7th round. I think it was like from Navy, I think. So not anyone that's really going to be taking any targets away. No one's that's going to come in there and demand targets right off the bat. Preston Williams, another UDFA. He was actually off to a really nice start last year before tearing his ACL. 8 games that he was featured in, he had 6+ targets in 7 of those, and he had 60+ yards in 4 of those. So you look at that offense, it's Gesicki, Devontae Parker. I will always hold out hope for Albert Wilson. It's kind of becoming my next Sammy Watkins, I think. But outside of that, man, I mean, obviously they brought in Breida, but I mean, I don't think he's really going to command that many targets. So if you look at that, it's going to be Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, and then Preston Williams. And if you're getting someone who has wide receiver 2 upside, like at his highest level, being able to snag him in the 13th round, and I really don't see too much hype that's going to drive him up too much higher either. So he's someone who I think is going to going to be able to stay around. He's going to be a double-digit kind of guy who you can go in and just take a flyer on and feel pretty confident about his target share at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, he got hurt, right? So, like, he kind of
tore his ACL.
You don't have that vividness bias with him, right? Where, like, he had that strong end of the season where it kind of raises his draft capital. People kind of forget about him. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far here, but I actually think the Dolphins are going to be competitive this year. People are going to laugh at that because of the Dolphins, but I actually think they have a shot of winning. I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're going to like make the playoffs or anything, but like with all the additions they've made, like they are doing this right. They are building this team the correct way. I think they could end up winning 8 or 9 games this year, maybe. Like I think maybe that's too high. Maybe 7 to 8, right? I think that, and that would be a nice progression for them. Because I don't know what they're going to do with Tua. I still think that it would be smart to give him the redshirt year, let him sit this year out, learn everything, completely heal up. And if they're in even winning at all, like then I don't think Tua sees the field at all. So we'll see what happens. But you're right. Like I do like Preston Williams. Going in the 13th round, I think is a great value for him and what he brings to the table, because he was kind of the man there for a little while. It was kind of him and Devontae Parker going back. So I like Preston Williams. I think people have kind of forgot about him. So I do like that call. So actually, let's stick with the Dolphins, right? So mine is actually Matt Breida. And as one of mine. Now, I feel like I've been Matt Breida fan hype train for the last couple of years. Like it was the same thing last year when he was in San Francisco. Now he got traded this year, just recently, to the Dolphins. Now, I do expect that Jordan Howard is going to be the starting running back for this team, at least out of the gate, right? Mm-hmm. But we know that Jordan Howard is not a pass-catching running back. And so I do think that Matt Breida, who's had at least 20 receptions each of the last 2 years, is certainly capable of being the pass-catching back. They don't have anybody else. They have Gaskins, and he's a nobody. I mean, they have nobody, right? So I think at the very least, I think Breida steps in and is at least the pass-catching running back in this backfield. And I think he has some PPR appeal where he can have some RB2, RB3 type weeks, especially if they're playing from behind, because that's not going to be good news for Jordan Howard. Now, I think this team is more competitive. The defense, they really went out and made a lot of improvements along the defensive side of the football. So we'll see. But I still think Matt Breida is an interesting target. Right now he's going as RB48, and I think that's too low for him. And if something happened to Jordan Howard, then this is his backfield. We've seen that Matt Breida has been very effective as a running back, was leading the league in rushing a couple years ago before he went hurt. He was the guy that, like, every week it felt like he was, like, leading the game. It was, oh, here we go. Matt Breida's hurt. No, wait, hold on. There he is. He's coming back. He's coming back, folks. He's coming back on the field. Looks like he just broke his leg, but he's back out on the field playing. Like, that's been Matt Breida. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if he's just dramatic or what. But regardless, I think Matt Breida's in a terrific spot. It's kind of that late-round target. Kind of get him, 12th, 13th, 14th round, something like that. And I think that that can pay off immediately and have at least some PPR appeal. So your next guy is another guy that I really like, something that I probably would have picked. But Anthony Miller, I really like Anthony Miller.
Yeah.
Tell me about Anthony Miller, who I also like Darnell Mooney, but I think that is we've already talked about him. But with Anthony Miller, why don't you just whisper sweet nothings about Anthony Miller?
Yeah, Darnell Mooney, he's going to be that that explosive kind of speed guy. I don't really see him being heavily involved.
Well, especially not now too, because they signed Ted Ginn. I was like, you really? But anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, again, both of those guys are going to be that kind of the ones that you set up to take that shot. I don't think there's someone who you're just going to be like, oh, well, you have to give him 5-6 targets a game. But anyway, with Anthony Miller, he's been one of my favorites since he came in. To me, it's a similar situation to someone like Preston Williams. They didn't add anything else to that receiving group. I mean, obviously outside of Cole Kmet, but I mean, there's still going to be plenty. It's going to be Allen Robinson, Cole Kmet, I guess, one of their 12 tight ends apparently, and then Anthony Miller. And I mean, like, that's really good. That's really going to be it. And if you look at, you want to kind of the opposite of Preston Williams, maybe someone who should have that recency bias. Anthony Miller, his end to the 2019 season, he was just on a tear, man. So from weeks 13 to 16, he was wide receiver 11, and that's including week 16 where he had one catch for 2 yards. So he was just on a complete tear there at the end of the year. Someone that I'm super excited about should have, and I think he's been banged up his first couple of years too. I know he had I think his rookie year he played through the dislocated shoulder, if I'm remembering correctly, had the surgery in the offseason. So obviously the quarterback situation isn't going to get any worse. How much of an upgrade is Nick Foles? Is, still remains to be seen. But again, in fantasy football, you chase opportunity and touches, and that's what Anthony Miller is going to have. And with how he finished the year, hopefully he can use that to kind of catapult him at the beginning of the year. And he's actually going a couple picks after Preston Williams. And again, similar to Preston Williams, I don't see there being a ton of hype behind Anthony Miller. So I think he's going to be safe as a late round guy as well.
No, I can dig that for sure. So
who's your next guy?
Well, we didn't get to talk about it last week, and I kind of whispered about it, but Anthony McFarland, love me some Anthony McFarland. Now, again, with Anthony McFarland, I do not trust James Conner to stay healthy at all this year. He just hasn't been able to do it in his career, and if something happens to him, like Anthony McFarland is the guy. And I think Anthony McFarland has standalone value as is. Like, I think he's going to be involved as a pass catcher. They've already said that they want to kind of be a little bit more RBBC there in Pittsburgh. That we know that James Conner is not coming back to this offense today or next year. Like he's gone after this year. This is his last year in Pittsburgh, and apparently it sounds the same thing with Juju Smith Schuster, which is again I think we talked about that last week, just a little bit crazy. But I think Anthony McFarland. I love Anthony McFarland, super explosive athlete. He was led the Steelers led this rookie class and yards created, per Graham Barfield. So like we talked about with him, like I love Anthony McFarland, and he is going way too late right now we're still waiting for rookies to adjust, stuff like that. But one thing that should be mentioned with at least rookie running backs is that there's not going to be as much of a steep as a curve in terms of learning the playbook or blitz pickup and stuff like that for these guys. So it should be a little bit more easier of a transition. I don't think Anthony McFarland steps on the field week one and has a huge role, but I think as the year progresses, and I honestly think that he's a starter by the end of the year. I really like Anthony McFarland, and I think he went in the fourth round, I believe. Which isn't terrible value for a running back. Like, you have to adjust when we're talking about running backs. Like, running backs aren't the same as other positions because they are devalued compared. So a running back that goes in the third or fourth round, that's still really good value. And that, that's where, a lot of the starters come from, right? So, like, I have no problem with him going there. Like, I don't look at that like, oh, he's just a fourth round pick. It's not great value. It's not great draft capital. Like, no, that's fine draft capital for a running back. So, I think with everything combined with Anthony McFarland, I think he's at a terrific spot. We know running backs do really well there. So, like I said, I like Anthony McFarland a lot, and he's somebody that I'm going to have a ton of this redraft season and best ball season for that matter. So, your next guy, which is on brand, is Alan Lazard, who is probably the luckiest guy because the Packers fucked the draft up, right? We don't have to keep going to that. Like, we know the fact that they screwed this up, but he is the beneficiary. Now, this is something that I want to ask you because I know Alan Lazard, and you can talk about why you like him and everything else, but I still feel like there is an opportunity here for a guy like Equanimeous St. Brown, who was hurt last year, who got hurt and did not play last year. I think he has an opportunity here, but tell me what you like about Alan Lazard.
I mean, I think there are some names. It seems like a crowded room, but like I really don't see there being that much competition, right? Like MVS, I think is still hanging around. Obviously, they brought in Devin Funchess, but with Alan Lazard, he was second receiving yards last year. He had the second most catches amongst the wide receiver group. I actually think it went, obviously Devontae, and then I think that the two running backs were ahead of him, and then possibly even like Jimmy Graham as well. So, but amongst that receiving group, he was second in catches. You already talked about it. They didn't add anything, any heavy hitters like a lot of people were expecting and what would have seemed to have made sense in the NFL draft. And then there was also the article that Matthew Berry came out with whenever he was he spent some time at the NFL Combine and got to talk to some of the coaching staff, and they really talked up Lazard, so they liked him a lot. They were expecting him to have a big role this year. Then obviously, again, they didn't go out and add any of the big names at receivers. So to me, I mean, at worst, maybe he's not a consistent week to week guy. But if he is that wide receiver 2 in that Packers offense, and he's the steady wide receiver 2, he's going in the 17th round right now. So even if he isn't consistent, you're not spending high capital on him. You can kind of throw him in there on bye weeks or injury fill-ins, or depending on matchups or something like that. So to me, he is the perfect kind of late round guy, again, in the 17th round, that you can just go and snag, who might be able to return a much, much higher value than where you're drafting him at. I saw the eye roll. You're muted.
I can get on board with that, I guess, with him. It doesn't blow me away because there's other things that bother me as well about that. But you're right, 17th round. So what are we bitching about, really? It's 17th round. So if it doesn't fucking work out, which, I mean, there's leagues that don't even draft that many rounds. Some of them only do 15, so he could go undrafted, right? So we'll see how this progresses. I know that it seemed like he had a connection with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers talked up Alan Lazard as well last year. So we'll see with that. My next guy is actually on your brand, which I'm surprised not on your list, but is Sammy Watkins. Like, you are team Sammy Watkins. Like, pants off, whatever. My thing is with him, he's just going wide receiver 56. Like, that's... But I guess there's some things that justify it, because if you look at his numbers, I mean, it was wheels up for Sammy Watkins week 1, right? I mean, he had that monster 11 target, 9 receptions, 198 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 46.8 fantasy week, right? Number 1. Tyreek Hill went down in that game, so everyone was like, oh my goodness, we're about to get the Sammy Watkins breakout season.
It literally couldn't have gone any better for Sammy week 1. Like, dude, I had so many dynasty shares that I was just like, hell yes, I'm vindicated. Here we go. You're going to have to come with 5 first-rounders if you want Sammy off of me in dynasty. Let's go.
Yeah. Well,
and then
he only had one more usable week the rest of the season, where week 9 against Minnesota, he had 13.3 fantasy points, and he finished as wide receiver 26. That was it. So, I get it. Some of it was just super unlucky about touchdowns. He did not score another touchdown the rest of the season in terms of regular season. So, like, the yardage wasn't great by any means. He had 49, 64, 54, 45, 63, 39, 26, 0, 50, 49, 28, right? But in the playoffs, Sammy Watkins, again, like a phoenix from the ashes, rises up and balls in the playoffs.
Right.
So, like I said, some of this is just pure being unlucky, like he did not score another touchdown. Now, we also know about Patrick Mahomes getting hurt last year and how that really changed the offense, and they weren't nearly as dynamic as we typically see them after that. They had certain games, and Tyreek Hill finally came back, Mike McCole Hardman back in the offense. But I'm going to tell you right now, Sammy Watkins is going to be the number 2 wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs this year. They're paying him a ton of money. He's still getting $15 million. They cannot trade him. They cannot release him because they reworked his deal. Like, he's going to be involved in this offense. And I think at wide receiver 56, that's just a little bit too low for me. I think, if he was going, I think 45 is probably fair because of the other players in this offense. But I think this offense is going to be even more dynamic than it was last year because of what happened to Patrick Mahomes. But he still had 90 targets, which, again, isn't great. But, his 3 touchdowns, like I said, that he all had in week 1, I think there's some positive regression coming his way. Which is crazy to me when you think about how bad he was, but he still finished with 10.5 fantasy points per game, which, like, what? Like, somebody that was that bad. Anyways, regardless of that, like I said, I think Sammy I think that's a little bit too low. If you want to take him with, a late round, maybe like in the 13th, 14th round as a flyer, there's not a better offense to get pieces of, and this is one of them. And getting him at wide receiver 56, like I said, he's going to be the wide receiver 2. Like, that is happening. And I think Mecole Hardman likely is the wide receiver 3 in this offense. So I still think Sammy Watkins holds some value, and I think he can bounce back a little bit, this year. And, contract year is undefeated, right? And this is his contract year. So if he wants to continue playing after this year, I think Sammy Watkins deserves a little bit more love than what he's getting.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you said to anyone, you can get Kansas City's wide receiver 2 at the end of the 13th, beginning of the 14th round, like you should be running to make that selection. Hardman is being drafted ahead of him. Like I said, obviously this is early ADP, but he's going 2 rounds ahead at 11:07. So, again, wide receiver 2 in the Kansas City Patty Mahomes offense. You don't have to convince me or twist my arm to take Sammy Watkins. So just to round out my top 5, I don't necessarily I'm not going to call him a sleeper, but Christian Kirk is currently being drafted at the end of the 9th round. I think it's just a little undervalued for him, and with what they did with bringing in D-Hop and everything else. And obviously Kyler had himself, it seemed like pretty quietly, a really nice QB1 year, especially for a rookie with not a lot going on. So Christian Kirk at 909, that just seems a little undervalued, maybe a little post-hype sleeper going on there. Hopefully we see that offense open up, and what we thought we were going to be getting out of Cliff Kingsbury coming into the NFL, maybe we get that in year 2. The last guy that I'll touch on, Jack Doyle, at 11:09. I think we touched on him in maybe the best ball episode we did a few weeks back, but still, I mean, Phillip Rivers, I don't think we're going to see too many deep balls from him. It's going to be, from what we've heard so far, it's going to be one of those quick release, quick hitting passing games. The only established piece there is going to be T.Y. Hilton, and then, I mean, we both obviously love Michael Pittman. I'm a big fan of Paris Campbell, but outside of that, man, I think it's going to be a lot of T.Y., a lot of Jack Doyle. So getting him at 11:09, like, I would rather take Jack Doyle than Dallas Goddard, and Goddard is going 2 rounds ahead of him. So those would be my last 2 early sleepers for 2020. Who are your last 2?
Yeah, so for me, it basically comes down to Mike Gesicki. He's right now going as tight end 12 for his ADP, and he's going in the 9th round. Now, if you look at their ADP, though, I guess we should mention this. This is their best. This is best ball. This is FFPC and big ball, or best ball 10s, which is best ball ADP. So that you want to take that a little bit of consideration, because right now they basically have 16 running backs going in the top 9 rounds, or tight ends going in the top 10 rounds. That ain't happening, okay, in a regular draft. This is not happening. So you have a little bit of a tight end premium here. But I think Mike Gesicki probably ends up going probably in normal draft, probably 10th, 11th round, somewhere right around there. And I think he actually has the best path to be this year's Austin Hooper. If you look at Gesicki last year, one, we know he's a super athletic tight end. But earlier on the year, last year, when they were trying to figure out what they were doing with everything, and everything was kind of falling apart there in the early part of the year, he didn't really do a whole lot. He had the most fantasy points he had from week 1 through 8 was 8.1. But then after that, he kind of exploded a little bit. Week 9, he had 15.5. And then he had 3.8, 5.8, then 11.8, 18.9, 1.6, 8.7, 26.2 week 16, and 13.4 week 17. I really like Mike Gesicki. Super athletic tight end, like I mentioned, played 15 games last year. I think this offense is better. I mean, he is everything you want. He's 6'6", 250 pounds. That 96 percentile 40-yard dash, 118.7 speed score. Burst score is fantastic. I mean, he just is off the charts tight end, right? In terms of athleticism, there's not a ton there in terms of things to take away from him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he led the team in targets this upcoming season. I definitely think he's going to be the main benefactor inside the red zone. I love Mike Gesicki. I guess I could have used this time to talk about Dan Arnold, because can we talk about the fact that Dan Arnold, no, they didn't draft a tight end, so he should be their tight end one. But regardless, I'm not talking about Dan Arnold today, but I like Mike Gesicki a lot. My last guy, I don't know how I feel about this yet. Like, I'm still processing it. I'm debating it. Nikhil Harry. He's going at wide receiver, I think 59, right? I don't love the Patriots offense. I just a little bit ago said I think it's going to be one of the worst offenses in the league. I still stand by that. But there's nobody else there. It's him and old-ass Julian Edelman. I'm sure Julian Edelman's going to have the motivation of a turtle, right? So I think the opportunity is going to be there. They drafted him to draft capital last year. He started off the year hurt. He never really got going. He didn't get any really opportunity. But for Nikhil Harry, this is kind of, this is a year for him. I mean, last year he only had 1 week against Cincinnati where he had 4 targets. He had 2 receptions for 15 yards and a touchdown, which got him 11.7 fantasy points. Other than that, he did absolutely nothing last year. But everything else, people have to remember, Nikhil Harry was a lot of people's wide receiver 1 last year. Heading into this time last year, people love to kill it. When he went to the Patriots, everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic!" Tom Brady's gonna have a strong weapon as a pass catcher, and then he got hurt, and then it just went progressively worse from there. So I do think Nikhil Harry, at his current price tag, which is going, I believe, in the 11.5 in FFPC drafts right now in terms of his ADP. I think there's lots to like here. If you can get him 12th, 13th round, somewhere in that 11 through 13 round range, I would like to take a flyer on him. Yes, they're going to have Jarrett Stidham as their starting quarterback, and I don't think that's going to change. It's just every single week a quarterback gets released, something happens, everyone's like, yep, Bill Belichick's going to bring him in. No, I'm pretty confident at this point that they're not bringing in any quarterback, that they're going to roll with Jarrett Stidham, that they're going to see what happens, and maybe they tank this year, and that's almost what it looks like they're doing, because they've made no effort to bring anybody in. They don't really have a ton of cap space to begin with, but they don't really have anything else to go for here. And so I think that they kind of do this year as a reset year, come back next year, and add some pieces and kind of turn the page here on the Tom Brady, everything else that happened there. So I think Nikhil Harry has some fantasy upside. I don't think it's massive. I don't think he's somebody that's going to be like a wide receiver 1 or anything like that. But I think he can be at least a decent wide receiver 3 this year in terms of, because there's just nobody else there. They're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. So that's what I think like about Nikhil Harry is the kind of a late round flyer. But so that's where we stand right now with everything. So those, again, my top 5 are Matt Breida, Anthony McFarland, Sammy Watkins, Mike Gesicki, and Nikhil Harry. We'll probably obviously revisit this a bunch over the next couple of months once we get closer to redraft. So I thought it was interesting, kind of take a look at the landscape right now. Some guys that we think that are going a little bit too early, especially if you're in best balls, guys that you should be targeting there as well. So other than that, you got anything else to preach on?
No, man. I would just love to hear from the community. So if you're rewatching this on YouTube, drop your favorite sleepers in the comments, or if you're listening to this in podcast form, definitely hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're everywhere. We out here.
We're worldwide. So, anyways, I think a cat was trying to get his word in there for you.
Fucking hate that cat.
Oh,
so much.
Yeah, well, cats are the worst. I'm more of a dog guy myself, but regardless, I really appreciate everybody checking out the show. Like I said, please hit that like, subscribe. If you're listening to it on podcast, be sure to rate and review the show. It really helps us out, lets us know kind of how we're doing. We do have something special coming up. We have a new logo that we've been working on that should be out here really soon. A new website logo. We're really excited about it. So that'll be out. We're going to be doing some shirts. We're looking forward to that. I talked about it last week. I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, is that we are going to give out a few some of our shirts. We're going to put the new design on there. We're really excited about it. We're going to give out some shirts, so stay tuned for that on all the details there, because we're really excited about doing that. We're also going to give out some free best ball drafts as well. So like I said, we're just trying to give back to the community. So I really appreciate everybody checking out the show. And until next week, be sure to check out The Last Kingdom, because it's the fucking tits. And maybe Cody will watch it. Probably won't. Well, and at least we get some sports this weekend. And fuck yeah for the NFL release or NFL schedule release. We'll see you guys again next week. Peace.